It's time. It's time for you to live better.
It's time for you to feel healthier.
It's time for you to live longer.
It's time for you to enjoy your journey.
It's time for you to understand your body and your mind. Thank you so much for joining us on It's Time today. We are your hosts. I'm Lindsley Donnelly, your citizen scientist and your longevity expert for midlife women.
And I'm Dr. Jen Wagner, physician and holistic performance expert. Welcome to It's Time, powered by Prosper. Just a quick reminder, the information discussed in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. We are not offering medical advice, nor are we entering into any type of physician or clinician relationship with listeners. Always consult your healthcare provider before beginning any new fitness, nutrition, or lifestyle changes to ensure they're right for you. Your health and safety is our priority, and let's keep it that way. Thank you.
Well, welcome back, everybody. We're so excited to have Jae Berman join us today on It's Time. Jae is an amazing licensed dietitian. She has done a ton of work in the women's health space, not only with how we feed our bodies, but how we feel about our bodies and that whole behavior interaction that goes along with food, which I think is a pivotal piece we sometimes don't always address. I have had the great fortune of meeting Jae, oh my gosh, almost like a year and a half ago now, where we were trying to do some work on some projects and just fell in love with her approach to how we fuel ourselves and her deep knowledge in a space that I think is being invaded by a lot of people that don't have a deep knowledge. And so really, she is my go-to vetted source for anything nutrition related and to kind of pressure test what's in the media and what we're seeing. So we're so excited that you're here with us today.
Yay. Thank you. That's fun.
Why don't you tell us like a little bit about your background and how this journey, especially the journey kind of into the women's side of things came for you?
Okay. Yeah. Because the story could get long, so I'll keep it short. Yeah. So, but I'll say one thing from the very beginning, because it fuels everything. So, I was a terrible eater growing up, like loved junk food, didn't eat a vegetable, wanted nothing to do with anything healthy. And then it wasn't until I traveled abroad when I was 18 or 20 years old, my third year of college, and was exposed to all these different foods and was exposed to all this different like positive relationship with food. I traveled to all these different places and it's so beautiful the way people connect with food. And then I came back and I had to cook for the first time. Like that was like real. I couldn't, the first couple of years in the dorms, I didn't have to really cook. And I had these beautiful connections around cooking and connecting to feel and going to the grocery store and going to the market. And then I came back my senior year, so it's 1999, and everyone was on the Atkins diet.
Right. I do remember that.
And, everyone was starving. Myself, I had a college roommate who was like doing sprays of, I can't believe it's not butter spray. And I was like, what are you doing?
And the little powder things on rice cakes.
Yeah. That's right. Everyone was doing all this stuff. And I had just come from this beautiful connection with food and how we eat and cooking together and being together to this just did not feel right. And so it wasn't until after college that I got into nutrition and I became a yoga teacher, and that led me to a degree. I went to Columbia for a degree in nutrition and physiology. And without realizing it, Columbia has a major focus on sustainable agriculture. So it was there in grad school that I learned like really where your food comes from and the connection to soil and the food bill and politics and that whole complicated world. So I was very fortunate kind of in these steps and early in my career of learning so many important things. Fast forward, was a private practice dietitian. And about 8 to 10 years in, I thought, I can't do this anymore because no one's changing and like no one actually wants to do this. And I was just so kind of heartbroken. And now the paleo diet had come out, and the paleo diet like completely contradicted everything I learned in school. And there were all these people with all these different issues, like autoimmune issues and inflammatory issues and gut issues. And I had nowhere to send them to for help. And so one thing led to another, and I ended up at Stanford in doing the Diet Fit study that compared low carb and low fat diets. And that was a wonderful experience. And, the spoiler alert is both diet works. It doesn't matter. But are you motivated to actually create change is what makes the difference. And then after that study, that launched me into kind of the health tech world, which I've been in for about 8 years now, working for a few different personalized and concierge practices, which is wonderful and very cool to see how like data can make different recommendations and how everyone's a little different. And then we're all kind of the same, you know, so you kind of have to look at both. And then my women's journey started with me feeling pretty terrible about 4 years ago now. I felt fatigue. I felt weight gain. I felt brain fog for the first time in my life. I thought I was going crazy. And I thought, could this be perimenopause? And it turned out to be mold toxicity, which caused me to have to leave my house. But it led me to interview about 10 doctors during that time just to understand what was going on with me. And just being so disheartened by like the inconsistency in information, making me feel crazy. So much was out of pocket. I mean, I just left completely like heartbroken, alone, confused, you know, and the only way I figured it out is I work with a doctor now that I pay out of pocket. So almost all of my healthcare issues are completely out of pocket now, which I don't think is how, you know, women should have to do things.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Yeah. And so now I still work in private practice and work with all sorts of people, but I find the conversation around like how to support women very interesting because I'm 46 years old and right in it. And I also feel like, I don't know, like when I open up my social media fields, it's like feeds, it's just like a bunch of, they stress me out, you know?
Yes.
It really stressful. Like on the one hand,
especially this. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm thrilled that perimenopause and menopause are getting this moment. And I don't want it to be a moment. I want it to be a forever. But I just, I feel like some of the recommendations are making us all just become maybe more restrictive or more stressed and maybe not enjoying this really beautiful, powerful, transformative time in our lives.
Yes. Yes. You know, Jae, one of the things I've heard you say before that just really resonates with, I think, both of us again and again is that everybody's journey is different and everybody's body is different. You know, so there are some fundamental truths, right? So there's maybe, I don't know what that is. Is it 60% of the equation? Is it 80% of the equation that if you're hitting this moment in time where the big takeaway is, hey, it's different. You know, what I did in my 20s and my 30s and even my early 40s doesn't work. It's different. Now what? And I love the way you describe it's different. Now what? You know, the couple of things to start with might be here, but realize that it's your journey. You need to play with it and get comfortable with that iterative cycle.
Yes.
So, but you know, if women are looking at it going, I don't even know where to start. Are there like 2 or 3 things that you say, hey, take a beat and let's try these 2 or 3 things first. And then, you know, kind of keep working the next level.
Yeah. And, I was just talking about this earlier today with a doctor about the same concept. It's like we get so caught up in like steps 5, 6, 7, 8 that we forget step 1.
Yes.
And so I feel like I'm continually reminding clients as well as myself, like to come back to step 1. And so step 1 is, you know, whole real foods, which can so easily get off track with that, you know, like, so it can get off track if you go on a trip, you know, even if you're eating whole real foods at home, all of a sudden you travel and you're eating processed foods without meaning to, and then you kind of fall off the bandwagon. Or, you know, for whatever reason, you're not eating whole real foods in your life because you don't realize you can, right? Because you're so busy with time. So you're like, I don't have time to cook or I don't have time to make it happen. But you really could make it happen if you figure out what's the approach for you that will work. And then the macronutrients, right? So protein is key. And so making sure that you're getting protein, there's the recommendations. I had the fortunate opportunity to talk to one of the leading researchers, Dr. Stu Phillips. And so, I mean, I had like a half hour with him and I was like, how much do we need to eat? Like I was just what do we need to do?
Break it down.
Like, I don't even need, you know. And so his recommendation was that the high end of the data supports 1.6 grams per kilo which is about 0.72, 0.73 grams per pound.
Okay.
Right, is recommended. So say if that's at the high end of the range, say you go like 1.4 to 1.6 grams per kilo. It would be the recommended dosage. So figuring out how much you weigh, putting that in pounds, and then doing the math there a little bit, and then figuring out how to spread that out throughout the day.
Which can still be a lot for a lot of women. That could still be 100 grams of protein, which is a new number to figure out the mechanics.
Yeah.
And food.
And it does typically work out to be around 90 to 110 grams of protein, which, is a lot. And so that's the thing is so many people will say like, oh, I eat a lot of protein. Protein's my thing. Well, one egg is only 7 grams of protein. So if you're trying to get 30 grams of protein in the morning, you're eating from eggs, you're eating 4 eggs. Or if you're trying to get that through Greek yogurt, that would be like 2 cups of Greek yogurt. So a significant amount of food that most people don't. And then if you are eating at a restaurant, often the serving is 3 ounces. So that's only 21 grams. So again, paying attention to how much you're getting so that you actually could get about, depending on the person, somewhere between like 30 and 40 grams per plate. And go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you right there, Jay, because that brings up a question we hear a lot is it 100 or is it 30 grams per seating, or 40, so there's this minimum dose you have to activate the superpowers of protein or something.
I'm just going to bust out my phone here because I used to be really good at math until perimenopause hit, and now I rely on a calculator. So if you're 150 pounds, let's just say, or is there a number you would think of like for an average weight? Okay. So if 150 pounds, and so if you do that times 0.73, oh wait, that's not right. Times 0.73, right? That's 109 grams of protein. And if you do that times like, if we lowered it just a little bit times 1.4, that'd be like 95. Okay. So if you're trying to get about, again, 90 to 110, that's typically what it is for most women. You have to think about, do I want to eat that over 3 meals a day? We haven't even brought up the fasting topic, but if you're fasting and you're eating a shorter window, do you want to eat that over 2 meals a day, which would be like 40 to 50 grams of protein per meal? Yeah. Do you want to eat that over maybe 3 meals and 1 snack? So everyone needs to figure out what's right for them, kind of that point you were making at the beginning. And what works for you is many things. It's appetite, like how hungry am I at a meal? And then it's also your schedule, right? Which so many people are like, oh, it's fine, I'll make it work. And it's like, you're not going to make it work. Like you're busy, things are happening. And so how do you fit it in? So what I typically try to work with women or people is the 30 grams per plate, because that seems hard enough.
Yes.
And then if they're eating 30 grams per plate, then I start to do more math with them to figure out like, okay, are you reaching your goals? How are you feeling? Do we need to add more? Do we need to add less?
Okay.
And I tweak it from there.
Okay.
So I want to ask a question going back to like making this approachable for people who like, to me, that's a huge goal. And like, it's probably one of the main things I'm even personally looking at now is like adding protein at different times when my body's not used to it. Like, I kind of feel like, we get in these things like, oh, you need to lift heavy, and people think they're going to walk into the gym and pick up these heavy weights on day one. Do you recommend like a gradual entry into this and like you work up? I know if I sit down and start eating 40 grams of protein at a meal, I'm going to feel terrible.
Totally. So and this goes to that, you have to figure it out. So there's some people who, when I say to them, I want you to move towards 30 grams of protein, and they say, I'm doing a really good job with that. And I ask them, and this is where I say, log your food for a day, with this, since this protein thing has gotten like so out of hand, I'm actually telling people to buy a food scale and measure food. I never used to do that before because I don't like to like have people overcount, but this protein conversation, I'm like excited for the protein conversation because I'm so sick of talking about carbs and fats, right? I'm just so over the carb conversation and fat conversation. So it's fun to talk about protein, but as we do in this culture, we turn everything dramatic. So now protein has become such a thing. So I have been recommending people to buy a food scale just to see like, what is 4 ounces of protein? 4 ounces of protein is 28 grams of protein. So or animal protein. So measure, what does 4
Yes.
ounces of protein look like? What does a cup of beans look like? How many eggs are you currently eating? Because so many people just don't pay attention.
Yes.
So
So
when you
I
do
had to
have
do
to do
that.
that,
I had to do that. And
Good.
to
What'd you learn?
your point, it just takes a week. It's not like you have to do it all the time. Like you're not signing up for this major friction moment. It's super doable.
That's
It's a
right.
little weird in the beginning because you're putting your food on this, scale, and then you're wiping it down and doing it again. But it does help you just get the visual, and
Yeah.
then you move on. You're like, okay, I got it now. Thanks.
Yes.
I got it in my head. It's sort of the hand. It's, for me,
Right.
you find it. So that,
Yes.
I think that's a
But
great
you have
tactical thing.
to learn to trust yourself, right? So some
Mhm.
people get so they don't want to trust themselves, or they're doubting themselves. So then they start weighing their food for the rest of their lives. But that would be the ideal scenario, what you just described, Lindsley. About a week, you measure it, you get an idea of like, okay, it really is about a palm. It really is
Yes.
about a fist. It really is about this much. And then you figure it out from there.
Yeah.
And then you
Awesome.
can
So
apply that when you eat out.
yes. So we interrupted you, and I'm sorry. It's whole foods, it's protein, and then the other basics that start with
Fiber.
So wait, you were just say that. That's my struggle. Jen's on protein. I'm like, how do I get this fiber in? I can't eat enough green apples and artichokes.
Yeah. And so yeah, so fiber is like the least sexy topic that no one likes to talk about, and it is the most important food. So, it is great for your heart. It is so like in all this gut conversation that everyone's having, and so many people who follow a lower carb diet, but then they're really into supportive gut health. Like that conversation makes no sense to me because carbs break down to short chain fatty or certain carbs, but most carbs with fiber in them break down to short chain fatty acids, which feed the good bacteria of our gut. So you have to have fiber. Yes. So beans, like the least sexy food, but the most powerful food. There are jokes about me and my team and like how often we recommend legumes to everybody. But like if you eat a cup of beans a day, your health, everything will be better if you do that.
Yeah, Jen's heard me share this, but I tried this, like the gut diet, and it was lentils and rice was kind of the basic thing, right? And so it was beans. And my HRV, we both wear Oura rings, and my HRV through the roof. It was like the best. It was better than the cold plunge, better than the sauna. And I'm a carnivore, so I was like, what? This is like beans and rice thing is really jamming for my metrics.
It doesn't surprise me at all.
Sorry, Chris, I'm going to be eating more beans.
Well, over time, hopefully the fermentation will end. But so I love plants and all plants, but they have to be whole and real and getting food plants that have fiber in them. So that is where beans come into play. That's where potatoes with the skin on come into play. That's where grains come into play. And, they get such a bad rap, and it's just painful because it's actually part of the whole weight struggle that we deal with is people are so afraid to eat carbs. So they cut out all grains, they cut out all starches, they cut out all complex carbohydrates from their diet, but then they end up snacking all day. And most people aren't getting enough protein. So then they end up snacking. So then you end up overeating later on who knows what, and then you gain the weight. So all the work that people are doing to follow a low carb diet, unfortunately, if they actually just ate good quality carbs, they'd probably achieve their goals.
Interesting.
That's a great point.
One other thing with fiber that I don't feel like we hear much about or talk much about, with all the noise and excitement around protein, people are talking how to get it from real foods and how, if you need to supplement a little bit, how to do it. What about fiber supplements? Like, I feel like we never talk about that. Like, whole food is always best, but like you said, it's hard to get done.
Yeah.
Like, what would you recommend for that?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of all of those supplements with two caveats. One, that the supplements are good quality supplements. And then that they are treated as an actual supplement. So you are still eating whole and real foods. You don't just all of a sudden live off powders all day long. So when it comes to protein powders, looking at the ingredient, and ideally it's an organic source of whatever the protein is, and it's one ingredient. That's my ideal scenario. And they do exist out there. So whether it's whey or whether you choose pea protein or hemp protein or whatever else you want to choose, if you want to go plant, or even if you're choosing the like beef isolate proteins, but again, ideally it's organic and there's really just one ingredient in the ingredient list. And then fibers for fiber powders are really cool. And I've actually been playing in that space a little bit more lately. You just have to be careful that your body can digest it. So, like right now I probably have like 5 different powders that I'm playing with in my smoothie powder. So, there's things like guar gum, there's things like inulin, there's things like black currant acacia powder. There's all these different fibers that you can take. But ideally, you would be working with a gut test, or you would be knowing what powder, what bacteria you're trying to grow. And then again, you would be very sensitive to the fact that you might start taking one of those things and all of a sudden you get super bloated or gassy or whatever. And then again, it requires that awareness of like, I need to dial that back a little bit and see what's going on. So I wouldn't go into it too hot and fast on your own, because that might cause some GI issues. But there are some very cool things to do with some powders. Yeah.
Okay. That's great to know.
I'm a big fan of that. And then the third category is the healthy fats, right? And so healthy fats are fats that come from, nuts, seeds, avocado, and olives. Those are those unsaturated fats that have all the benefits. And whether that's in a avocado oil or an actual avocado or almond butter or an actual almond, or, all the different things, all those fats are great for all sorts of things. I like to say this, especially with the perimenopause world that talks so much about skin. There is fat in all of our cells that surrounds our cell capsules. So the fats that you eat are what make your skin look the way it's going to look. So if you're eating really processed fats, or you go too low in fat, you can sometimes see that on someone's face because their skin is not as plump. So eat the healthy fats, and then work on balancing those 3. So, getting enough protein in, getting enough fiber in, getting the healthy fats in, and then making sure you find your amount, right? The portions, the next part. So how much food do you need to eat at one meal so that you stay satisfied or satiated for the next couple of hours? And whatever body composition goals you're trying to achieve, whether it's weight loss, weight gain, weight maintenance, building muscle mass, all the different things, losing fat, are you actually achieving those things, right? Which requires you to honestly assess yourself.
And when you're recommending that, are you saying give yourself, what is it? Is it a 2-week window to try a new cadence or a new mix in your
it's probably going to take more than 2 weeks. I would say a minimum of a month. I mean, it takes people a minimum of a month just to like get a routine down, right? Some things could happen really easy. Some things you might notice really quickly, like how Jen was saying, like if I tried to eat 40 grams of protein right now, I'd be really uncomfortable. So like, I don't want anyone ever like gagging or like forcing themselves to eat or something like that, right? So you might notice, whoa, that's way too much food at one time. I need to figure this out, or vice versa. I'm hungry. Like I'm trying to follow this plan, but I'm really hungry. Okay, well then let's adjust accordingly so that we don't have you being too hungry. That might happen within a couple days. But kind of a longer term weight loss or body composition goals, it's going to be a couple of months. So that's why consistency, again, every word I say is so unsexy, right? Fiber and consistency. So consistency is so key, because you have to be consistent with the workouts and food and sleep for a certain amount of time to actually see, is this working? And then if it's not, then you need to be like, okay, I tried that for 1, 2, 3 months. And now what am I going to do differently to assess it again? So it is a little bit of a slow roll.
Well, it sounds like, because we get questions around body comp for sure. But we also have questions around, you've touched gut, which is such a, getting a lot more conversation, hot topic, but also just, what do I eat for energy? What do I eat for sleep? What do I eat for hormones? And it sounds like it's the same thing, or, as body comp. It just, you're measuring a different outcome alongside.
Right. And that's where, exactly. I mean, you can get into some really nuanced stuff, which I wouldn't do with someone until later on with working them. Again, get those basics organized before we start working and like specifically add this food or add this nutrient based on whatever you're looking for. But energy, I mean, the majority of human beings, I know this is crazy because we have an obesity crisis, but the majority of us are not eating enough.
I think that's so interesting.
That's so counter
So
logical or intuitive or whatever the right comparison is, but it's like, this doesn't sound, it's like we're just eating a lot of junk. So it's not enough nutrients.
And it's funny because as much as so much has changed in the 20 years, I know I was saying this early on in my career. I would say this and it still stands by, like a typical person is eating, maybe like a yogurt and fruit, or maybe, nowadays, like some avocado toast with an egg, maybe. Then they're going and having a salad with chicken for lunch, right? Like that is the healthy person's lunch, right? And then they're missing snack and they're starving by dinner time. And so then the overeating happens at dinner time. And even if dinner time is organic, whole, real, whatever, if you eat, a couple thousand calories of salmon, broccoli, and rice at 7 p.m., you are going to gain weight.
And not sleep well.
And not sleep well. Right.
Yeah, and not sleep well.
Ideally, it's like spreading out the calories throughout the day. And so you're actually satiating yourself throughout the day. And that goes to the energy question. So many people have low energy because they're not fueling themselves. And, if we stay in the women topic, right, we just completely overextend ourselves all day long. So we're just fried because we didn't take any time to just put food in our bodies for fuel. And then the hormone conversation is so complex, right? Because there's when someone's hormones are off, I mean, that could mean so many things. Right. So it could be sleep, it could be exercise, it could be food, it could be just eating enough. So that's a really hard one to answer. So that one, I don't go there. And then again, the gut one, that could get complicated depending on if we're trying to optimize gut. You might not notice things from a day to day, or if you're having major GI issues, then of course we would need to adjust your food to make sure that we get those flares down.
Quick question for you, because I love this podcast because I learned so much about life.
We get to ask all of our questions, right?
Questions?
Yes.
Part of
asking for a friend.
We're talking about consistency, right? And we have like long-term consistency, which is like getting it right most of the time. What about like the weekly variations? Like if we're tying things to exercise and sleep and things like that, like I know on days, like if I'm doing a heavy resistance day or something, I am much more cognizant about my protein because I'm like, oh, I'm breaking down, so I need to make sure I have build up. But like on a recovery day, I'm just hungry. Like that's just the bottom line. Like I'm just not hungry. And so it's really challenging for me to eat the same way on a recovery day as it is on. I still run a lot, whether that's good for me or not. It's good for my mental space. And so like if I go for a run, I'm starving the whole day. Like I eat so well that day. I am hungry. I am motivated. If I lift, I like theoretically know I need to do it. I don't have the same appetite, but I am focused. It's every day. Like, do we need to worry about 30, 30, 30? And is it as important in that kind of acute space? Or can we kind of fluctuate with our outputs?
Yeah. So, it's such a good question because I feel like if I was on a panel, we'd all give different answers.
So love that.
Yeah. So here's the things that go through my head. So first of all, before I give you a straight up answer, the first thing I would say to you is it working for you, Jen? Right? So like your qualitative experience or your sensory experience of this is on run days, you're really hungry and you're eating a lot and you're really making healthy choices because you're feeling hungry and motivated. On strength days, you are really focused on eating protein, so you're doing it. And on recovery days, you're not hungry. Okay, that could be fine if it's working. So if it was working, that would mean your body composition is going the way you want it to go. Your energy is going the way you want it to go. And no injuries are happening. You're not getting any like overuse injuries. Okay. So if it's working, I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Right. So I'm all for it. Okay?
Yeah.
Some women, right? It's like on some people on days when they run like that and then they overeat like that, it's like their weeks are like this, they're just all over the place. Like they're on a high and then they're on a low, and then recovery days they're down, and then they overeat, and then they, and you're just like, this isn't working for you. So you have to assess, is your sensory experience actually working with your physical data, right? So that's part one. So then part two is, I rarely am making immense shifts in people's day-to-day plans for two reasons. One, it is hard enough to get someone to just eat healthy and consistent, that like to give someone like, on running days, do this, and on strength days, do this, and on recovery, that just personally feels like too much to ask of someone. I always say this, like in this perimenopausal space, like I don't want to make an overwhelmed person more overwhelmed, So I'm hesitant to do that with someone. That doesn't mean I don't, but like I would definitely need to have a conversation with the client to make sure that they would be game to do that, which again, Jen, maybe you're game to do that. And then the second part is most people are not working out at such an athletic level that they actually need their macronutrients or calories to be so adjusted. But some people are. So if you are, then you would probably need to eat more on those days that you're exerting yourself more, and eat a little less on days that you really aren't.
And I will say, like, I'm asking it almost in like the reverse thing, is like, I actually don't think about it. Like, that's just like, if I'm left to my natural tendencies, like if I chart my food for a week, that's exactly what I see. I'm almost more like, is that actually okay if that happens? Not that I'm actually trying to do that. That's just what makes me feel good. Like I will admit this, and I talk about it a lot. Like, I've had a very complicated relationship with food, different periods of my life. I come from a long history of family eating disorders, etc. And so I know that, like, to me, like, when I'm hungry, I like to eat, and when I'm not hungry, it's really hard to make myself eat. And that's from depriving myself at certain times and almost being force fed at certain times. And so I feel like I've come to this balance and I'm happy with it. But I also sometimes worry on days when I'm not eating as much because I'm not hungry. Like, do I need to try to eat more in those days, or am I just okay to, like, this feels good today, so I'm going to do this?
Yeah, I mean, again, if it's feeling good and the quantitative results are working in your favor, then I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah, but I think, Jen, as you're bringing that up, I think that's a core thing for a lot of midlife women, right? And I don't know many women who've made it to midlife who have not had some sort of a uncomfortable, unsatisfying relationship with food, unfortunately.
Disordered eating is what it's called.
It just is our culture. It doesn't seem to be that way in Europe or New Zealand, or, I could be having rose-colored glasses, but it's hard in our culture. So I love this idea of learning to retrust your gut, and also having compassion for the fact that things may actually be very different. We always talk about the example of eating before you work out or after you work out. And neither one of us used to eat before we worked out. But I have now gone all the way through menopause, and I've found that if I don't feel great in that workout, and it's just, I get sick to my stomach, and I don't like it, which is very different than before I went through menopause. And I just had to just recognize that and be like, it's not wrong. I hear many people, especially in social media, talk about don't eat until noon. Like, there's just no way that would work for me. I couldn't function. And that, and learning to trust that. But then also take some of the science that says, hey, by the way, why don't you give yourself some protein? If you feel like a protein drink doesn't hurt your stomach, try it after you've lifted heavy. Okay, I can do that. So you can kind of pick and choose from the science-backed ideas to see what feels good.
To feel what feels good, and is it working, right?
And is it working?
Like there'll be so many people who come to me and are like, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, and I'm doing this. And then I'm like, is it working for you? And they'll say, what do you mean? I'm like, well, is your weight where you want it to be? No. Is your energy where you want it to be? No. Do you, how's your digestion? I'm bloated all the time, and it's like, okay, that's not working. But vice versa is true. Like, if you're, and I shared this story on an example, you were in a conversation I was in earlier with you guys, where I never used to eat before I worked out, just because who has the time? I was just like jamming and going and doing my thing, and whatever.
Getting there is hard enough.
Yeah, totally. And then just in the last, I don't know, 3 years, really, I was like, halfway through a workout, I'd be like, yeah, I'm like hungry.
Yeah.
Legitimately
Exactly.
like
Yes. Yeah.
dizzy. I mean, maybe if I was running a marathon or something, it would be that hitting the wall, but I'm not running a marathon. I'm doing like, Pilates or strength workouts, and like they're legit workouts, but it's not like athlete level workouts that normally I'd be able to do fine with no food. But for whatever reason at this point in my life, I'm like, Jay, stop and go eat and then come back.
Yeah.
And then now I notice when I eat before a workout, I'm great. My energy is great. My weights are great. And I'm seeing the results that I want to see. So you have to take that time to listen to yourself to assess how it's working.
Yeah. I just love that point that like you have to listen to how you feel.
Yeah.
And I think we try to fit in these models, and my least favorite word, protocol. And like, it's just not each of our journeys, and it's like, what you need, the basics, and I love going back to this, like whole foods, start with step 1, and then protein, and then our fibers, and then our healthy fats. And like, if you do those first 4 steps, you're like 80% of the way there. And it's fine tuning after that, what really works for you.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
The last thing I would say there is the balance plate. So my recommendation for people is every time you eat, there is a protein, a carb, and a fat present on your plate.
Oh, I love that.
So you are never eating something that is just so. That kind of sums up, that's a lot for the quote unquote basics of to eat real foods, to get all those macro targets, and to eat a balanced plate. That can take quite a bit of time to get used to, but that kind of encapsulates the foundation of the basics.
Yeah. Jay, I think I heard you say this. So check me if my memory is right, but it was new news for me because, we also try to add in creatine. And I think it was you who said, if you're not doing that with a carb, you're not getting the benefit of the creatine, which was also great to be like, hey, don't just put it in your water and pound it after you worked out. Like, at least put it in a protein drink that has some carbs because it's not going to work. That was really helpful.
Yeah, a colleague taught me that, and I'm so grateful to him because, that is just all the protein shakes that have creatine without carb, you're actually not utilizing as much.
Yeah.
So it's a great supplement, but yes, you want to eat it with a carb meal, which goes to this whole point of so many people are taking creatine to like think that they can like out hack their way from having a carb, but you cannot out hack your way from. Don't out hack your way from having a carb. Eat
or
carb.
From anything in life. You can't out hack your way, right? How about that?
No kidding. No kidding.
So yeah, I'm not. There's so many things that we've covered here that I feel like the building blocks are the fundamentals. But I'm always curious because you're so steeped in this. Is there something kind of on the horizon? We all heard about protein. We heard about gut health. We've heard about supplements. There's other conversations, peptides, hormones. Is there something on the horizon that you see out there that maybe people want to get smart on, that you think that is worth learning a little bit about that we haven't covered right now?
Excellent question. Honestly, so the only thing that I would say that's on the horizon and or that women need to get really smart about is HRT.
Okay.
Yeah. I just think that women really need to be educated on it. There's so many different protocols, or to use your word, protocols. There's so many
yes.
There's so many different things. And I just think that the more and more women could get smarter and educate themselves to find practitioners or approaches or things that feel good for them. And the answer might be that they don't want to do it, and that's fine too. But I do think that is a very cool space that is like just at the precipice of who knows where that's going to go. When it comes to food at this moment in time, no, like take 10 steps backwards and just
it's so relieving.
whole real food. That would be my greatest recommendation for everybody is like find ways to get comfortable in the kitchen, or whether it's ordering food or picking up, however you need to do it so that you and your family can eat whole, real, balanced plates consistently through the day.
And I think it's adding that culture piece into it, that social piece into it. If we look back over generations and generations and hundreds of thousands of years, people gathered around food, right?
Yes.
Stories were told. It's where community was made. And we're in such a hurry. Food has become this byproduct. And like just taking the time to sit down and share a meal with someone is so impactful.
Yes.
And we just need to get back to that. I know we're running close on time. So Jae, we're going to have you back on because I think we got like the first two things on our list.
Yeah. I know. Let's do like a little nutrition series. I'd love that.
Yes. Thank you. We would.
People found you. You have so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you.
And beyond. Like, where can people find what you're working on and what you're doing?
Yeah, so I think the best thing to do, my website, jaebermannutrition.com, which you guys can just include in whatever you do, along with my email address, because I got to be frank, I'm not sure if that contact page works on my website.
Well, if people are listening, as soon as they're not going to show notes, I just want to make sure they know it's JAE for Jae.
That's right.
JAE
at jaebermannutrition.com.
Okay, BERMAN.
Please send me an email. I'd love that.
Yeah, that'd be great. And for sure, we're going to have you back on. Like, I have a whole other list, and it's not just solving Jen's nutrition problems.
I've got some too.
I'd love that.
We so appreciate your time and your knowledge. And I mean, I even want to come back. Like, I even love your approach of reading ingredients before nutrition labels. Like, there's so many practical things we got to come in that I think, you know, I heard you say that in another conversation the other day, and I was like, I'm always looking at the wrong things. Like, all these different things to say, like, really, what am I putting in my body?
That's right.
So much to be continued. I'm to be continued.
I'd love that. I'd love it so much.
Thanks for your energy.
Yeah, thank you. This is so fun.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you so much for spending your time with us here today. If you liked what you heard and you got some tips on how to live better right now and for the long haul, please help us reach more midlife women. Please share and rate and like this show, and we can't wait to continue the dialogue with you on our next episode. Until then, thank you. It's time.